Okay. Any musical people in the room? Did you catch? There was a Godspell reference in there. Did you catch it? In James? Not Jesus. No, Jesus wasn't doing Godspell there. Sorry. All good gifts around us, they come from heaven above. Check it out. It's in there. Tradition is a good thing. We have lots of them. We are a very traditional faith, the Catholic faith. And I think in all my years in working in high school, I find some interesting things. Like, so if something's not working in a high school, you just have to wait a few years and it'll be completely different. Because the institutional memory is only about 3 years. It's not 4. If you think like a 4-year high school, it's not 4. And I proved it many times. When I used to be a national speaker, I once went to a school in Oklahoma City, Bishop McGinnis, and I spoke to the whole school. And that youth minister asked me to come back 3 years later, and I said to her, no, wait a year, then I can use all the same material. Because I had to speak to the whole school. 1 full hour, the whole school on the Thursday before homecoming. I practically lit myself on fire to keep their attention. It was a terrible idea. So anyway, I come back. She said, no, I really want you to come this year. Okay, so I get there, and I had some new material, so I'm talking to the AV guys that are setting up, all my slides and the microphone. These are very involved guys at the school. And so I said to them, I was just here a few years ago. And they said, really? I said, you don't remember. You were freshmen. Had no memory of it whatsoever. And these are involved kids, so I was like, perfect. Pulled out all my old notes, went right back to it. Not one person said, that's the same thing you said 3 years ago. Not one. I remember once taking a group of students to Jamaica when I was at the school in Michigan. And this young lady, she was a junior, we did something, and she put her hands on her hips and said, that's not the way we've ever done it before. I said, well, that's interesting. You've only been here once before. So it's actually last year was the only time we didn't do it the other way, But tradition is strong. And so that's what they're defending here is a tradition, right? They don't wash their hands. Of course, having come through COVID now, we see the, washing hands as a whole different meaning. But that's what they're upset about. And actually, of course, what they're really upset about is what they presume about the people that didn't wash their hands. Because Jesus, right, kind of comes at them strong based on what they said. They're speaking from the tradition. Hey, and they weren't nasty. Hey, we just noticed some of your people don't follow the tradition. Why is that? And he's like, wow, well did Isaiah prophesy about you hypocrites? And he comes after them. Well, of course, he knows what's in their heart. He knows what they're really driving at. And it isn't an innocent question. They're making all kinds of assumptions about those people. And of course, Jesus knows well and has seen well the things that they're missing as a result of being so focused on this tradition. He gives that long list of things that most of us, I think, can go, not me, not me, not me, right? I'm not murderous, I'm not, you go down the list. They're pretty strong things. But there's one that I think goes to what he's really talking about here, and one that I think we can all relate to, and that's arrogance. Arrogance. Plain and simple. I heard a podcast a number of years ago, and it was a long one. It was like an hour and a half, and I was driving down to see my mom, so I had the time. But at some point in it, the guy says to the two people he's interviewing, what's the greatest single piece of wisdom you've heard in your life? I thought, this will be good. I don't remember the first guy's. I really don't. It was good at the time. I thought it was good. But the second guy's made me stop and replay it and then think about it, and it was this. Don't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you think. Because if you believe everything you think, then you have to defend everything you think. Right? Some people, well, wait a minute. Well, maybe, all right, I'll hit pause. You think about it. Take it home. Mull it over. Because we think many things. And if we miss the opportunity because we think something, we feel strongly about something, to listen to someone else. And this happens to me a lot in political discussions. I worked in politics for years. I worked for a member of Congress. I was an elected official. And I have strong thoughts about things. And I have my experiences that I draw on from those things. But when I listen to someone else, if I listen to someone else, right? If I listen to someone else and their experience and their perspective, then I got to go, that's interesting. But it's the arrogance that we can all have, self included, to go, maybe not even let them get started with what it is they want to add to that discussion. And you may say, well, what's that got to do with the gospel in and of itself? Because true is true. Well, that's Jesus' point here. They're not talking about something that's deeply true. My goodness, in 20-some years as a priest, the number of times people have come at me with fangs bared about something that happened liturgically. And of course you go, well, there are a lot of rules around our liturgy. If you do not know, there's something called the General Instruction of the Roman Missal. The germ is called lovingly. The germ tells you where things happen and when they should happen. But it's an amazing number of people will come at you strong with their preference for something, because we have lots of options, but they'll come strong with you with their preference. That's when you want to go, whoa. We have options here. And that's what I mean around this idea of arrogance. St. Francis de Sales once said, look, if you're struggling with a vice, practice its opposite virtue. Put your time and energy into the virtue. A lot of people try to attack the vice, and Francis is saying, that's not a good use of your time. Because generally also, the absence of the vice is not virtue, right? The absence of sin is not holiness, if you've ever thought about it. It's just not sin. I do this with little kids all the time. If you're not supposed to talk in class, that's a rule. You don't break that rule. And I'm sitting there with you, and I'm chewing gum, and of course, I shouldn't be chewing gum. That's a rule too, isn't it still? Okay, mostly. And all of a sudden, I start to choke on that gum. But, teacher's talking, and you're not supposed to talk when teacher talks, so I'm going to wait until teacher's done talking to tell her that you're choking. I'm following the rules here, right? I'm not breaking a rule. I'm not sinning. You see what I'm getting at? The absence of sin isn't holiness, and the absence of vice isn't virtue. And so if what we all need to work on, as Jesus is calling out here, is just that arrogance that can show up because we don't think a lot of thoughts that we don't believe in, right? We wouldn't think them. But if we're so sure of that and we can't listen to others and maybe at least broaden our perspective a little bit, or at least understand where someone else is coming from, well, it's not the virtue. Humility is the opposite virtue, right, to the arrogance. And so how do we practice that? How can we just be present and listen for a moment? Versus, we've all been in those conversations where you're starting to share your position or your perspective or your take, and you can see in their eyes, they're just waiting for you to take a breath so they can, I see lots of nodding and laughing. This happens, right? They're just waiting for you to stop talking so they can fix it, so they can tell you where you're wrong, right? Why doesn't it work that way? I have a degree in communications. I've taken a lot of courses in persuasion and argumentation and debate, and I must have missed the day that we covered yelling at people, calling them names, and second-guessing their motives as a means of persuasion. But a lot of it's going on inside the church and out, Terrible people doing terrible things. And as Jesus says, you're missing it. You're missing what's really important because you put the tradition over top of people. And James again nails it. All good gifts around us come from heaven above. And what does he say is the undefiled religion? Can you see the widow? Can you see the orphan? If it all stays up in your head and it never gets lived out at the ground level, at the hand level, for the people that have been pushed to the margins, then it ain't the real thing. This is tough for each and every one of us, but it can't be about something else. And I submit to you, it's largely why people don't go to church anymore, is because if we can't be honest about that, if we can't ask for forgiveness when we've stepped on someone's speaking, when we're sure that we have the right information, or if you would just listen to me long enough, you'll see that I'm right. It doesn't work. I was thinking driving here tonight, did Jesus ever interrupt anyone? I was just going through quickly. I can't think of a time he interrupts anyone. Even here, where he knows what's in their heart, and they're making it sound innocent, and he lets them finish. He probably should have shut them down sooner, right? But he doesn't. I don't know, that struck me today. I don't think he ever interrupted anyone. And some people said insane things to him. He let them say it. And then he gave him his heart. He gave them the truth. And so for us, people that are here to receive his presence in this Eucharist, that we just take a moment humbly to think about the ways in which we need to be a little bit more like Jesus in that moment. You can think of those times that we've interrupted people. Let me just save you the time. I'll tell you what you need to know. Again, it can come off in small and silly ways, but we've all seen big and painful versions of this. And what we're being called to here is the humility of Christ. When Jesus self-defines, he says, I am gentle and humble of heart. Take my yoke upon you. You're going to find that it fits you. And so as we prepare ourselves for this Eucharist, that we just take a moment to think about that, what we're being called to, that long list of things that defile, and what they all have in common, they're coming out from us. And so if we're going to practice getting rid of those vices, it's best done, I think, by practicing the virtue. May God be praised.